Taika Waititi does not direct normal movies. A lot of places you will see the film Jojo Rabbit described as a comedy or a comedy drama. Some of the trailers even describe it as a satire against hate. And they're all mostly kind of sort of right, but really, it's just a drama. Yes, it has pieces that traditionally one would expect to see in a comedy, but they're here in this film for serious reasons, even if they are occasionally absolutely hilarious. What Taika Waititi does direct are detailed films. I mean this in the traditional way. The outfits, armaments, and vehicles witnessed throughout the movie are entirely accurate to the time period and locale of the film. But I also mean this in a storytelling sense as well. Not only are imaginary Hitler's outfits accurate to the uniforms that he wore at various times, but they help to represent how Jojo sees his idol at the various junctures of the movie. So you could say that Taika Waititi doesn't just direct detailed films, he also directs films that constantly ask themselves, why do one thing when six will do? Jojo Rabbit is definitely one such film. Hi, my name is Zacchaeus, and today I want to talk to you about Jojo Rabbit, the film with many themes and missions, and Taika Waititi, the man who wrote, directed, and starred in this film. I did mention he likes to do more than one thing whenever possible, didn't I? So go ahead and beware of spoilers for the movie that won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay on today's From the Hawk's Eye. On its surface, Jojo Rabbit tells a very familiar story. You'd be forgiven for thinking near the beginning of the movie that it might be just another take on Romeo and Juliet, but with Nazis and Jews instead of Montagues and Capulets. But it isn't a tragedy, and our two main protagonists do not decide to throw off their allegiances to fall in love. Instead, Jojo, as the main protagonist, played by Roman Griffin Davis, slowly realizes that the propaganda he has been fed about the dangers and horrors of Jews is utter nonsense. Yes, he falls in love with Elsa, played by Thomasin McKenzie. He's 10, lonely, and she's a girl who pays attention to him. It's only natural that that's going to happen. But where many stories would have had the realization that Jews are people occur to Jojo because he fell in love with her, the falling in love with her only occurs naturally as a matter of their interactions, and only well after he's begun the process of realizing that she's a person who deserves as much as he has. It's also equally, if not more important to the story that Elsa never returns his affections in the same way. This helps reinforce that we can and should learn that people who are different from us are people, even when they don't reward us with the things that we want from the relationships. She doesn't have to give him what he wants in order to still have worth. Which, honestly, now that I think about it, is a feminist message as well as an anti-racist message. There's Taika doing more than one thing at a time again. If you knew nothing else about this movie going into it, you probably were aware that Taika Waititi stars in it as Jojo's imaginary friend, Adolf Hitler. Without Taika's name attached, I might have been a little concerned about a movie making this choice, but with Taika, I knew that I could trust him and he didn't let me down. The reason Hitler is included is to replace what in a book would have been the literary device of the internal monologue, which is how we understand a character's motivations and feelings without having them speak to other characters out loud. Taika dances the line beautifully between creating a character who might have accidentally been sympathetic and creating a character who couldn't otherwise fill the role that he needs to fill. Waititi's Hitler often spouts rhetoric and propaganda that Jojo would have been exposed to, but it's filtered through the mind of a 10-year-old in the way that, by its very nature, an imaginary friend would have to do. Waititi also makes Hitler a bit buffoonish, which is great on the surface level because mocking Hitler is great fun and the guy does not deserve to be taken seriously. However, it also makes sense in the context of Hitler's role as the imaginary friend of a 10-year-old. Hitler can't be a 10-year-old's best friend if he's scowling and serious all the time. He has to be willing to have fun and say silly or encouraging things. That's how a 10-year-old understands friendship. One of the recurring bits in the movie is Hitler offering Jojo a cigarette. Now, Hitler famously hated smoking, wouldn't allow it to happen around him. So what does this tell us? This shows us that Jojo doesn't even understand what it is to be an adult, much less to be Hitler. Hitler wouldn't offer him a cigarette, but Jojo perceives adulthood as smoking on a regular basis. If you're an adult, you probably smoke. So Hitler is an adult in my imaginary friend. He's going to offer me some cigarettes. And it's beautiful how that happens. How we see these just tiny little details add up to show us this caricature of a man who is a caricature that, for the audience's sake, mocks Hitler, but for Jojo's sake, simultaneously gives him someone he can relate to. It also helps us to understand the internal struggle of a boy who believes that to be a good person, he must be everything Hitler's propaganda tells him to be, but who doesn't really understand what he's being taught. And this also serves two purposes. It shows us how easily propaganda can spread among a poorly informed populace, but it also shows us how Jojo doesn't truly understand what it means to be a Nazi, and he isn't as evil a child as he might otherwise appear to be. As the story continues, Jojo conflicts more and more with his imaginary friend to show his gradual move away from evil and the propaganda. His new understanding of the world shows that the propaganda doesn't belong. In the end, he kicks the imaginary Hitler through a window. This scene is impactful for multiple reasons, because it shows the physical representation of the strength of Jojo's desire to reject what he had previously believed. The broken window represents the shattering of Jojo's core values. It's also abrupt and funny as hell, because another tenet of Taika Waititi's writing and direction seems to be, if it can do all the things it needs to do and be funny, then let's do it that way. If you're paying attention, though, you'll also see many ways in which Taika uses humor to draw attention to the ridiculousness and danger of the Nazis as well. In one memorable scene, 5 members of the Gestapo arrive at Jojo's home, intent on searching for any contraband. But they're constantly interrupted, as each person present must hail each new person as they enter a room. As you watch it, you smile a little because it's silly. But you're also keenly aware of the danger posed to any person who doesn't hail quickly or loudly enough at the appropriate opportunity, especially Jojo and Elsa. In addition to the main plot, to my mind, the side stories help flesh out a moral to this story that goes beyond just women and people with different skin tones or religions have just as much value as men or people who are more like you. Or even just how easy it is to brainwash children with propaganda and how hard that can be for them to overcome. The story also shows us how war and bigotry can make victims of good people, or people who might have at least otherwise been good. We see Jojo's mother, Rosie, played by Scarlett Johansson, in one of her best performances that I've ever seen, forced to raise Jojo alone because of the war. For much of the movie, we're told that it's because Jojo's father is out fighting the Germans, or has died, or has deserted. In the end, we're told that he was elsewhere helping her and others as part of the underground resistance. So even as not a fighter, he's been separated from his child. Rosie is not given much screen time, but we see so much in what little we do see of her. We see her conscience require her to do what she believes is right in taking in Elsa and spreading pamphlets. But we also see the eternal conflict she has over the danger what she's doing holds not just for her, but also for her son, who she believes wouldn't even understand if he knew what she was doing. We also see her struggle to raise her son to have good morals despite being mired in a society that wants to teach him to kill and to harm others. We even see her try to find joy and happiness in the midst of all the fear, doubt, anger, and frustration. But I think my favorite part of the movie might be how Taika Waititi and actor Sam Rockwell handled the character of Captain Klinzendorf, or as he tells everyone to call him at the beginning of the movie, Captain K. One of the most interesting things to me is that Captain K doesn't really have much of a character arc in the traditional sense. What arc he does have is more of how the audience perceives him over time, rather than changes he undergoes. We are introduced to him at the very beginning of the film. He presents as a failed soldier who drinks heavily because he has been relegated to teaching kids how to be soldiers after a series of war wounds. Ordinarily in this role, you might assume that you were seeing an incompetent soldier or a stuffy bureaucrat pushed away from where he could cause harm to fighters at the front, but also where he might otherwise seek honor and glory. But if you look at his chest full of medals, you'll quickly realize that he was actually quite successful as a soldier before he was wounded. Further investigation shows that those are actually not just a lot of medals, but some seriously impressive ones, including both the first and second class iron medals awarded for personal acts of heroism, as well as a silver tank destruction badge, which indicates he destroyed an enemy tank by himself with only hand weapons. This is a man who fought well and hard for his evil country, but due to injuries no longer has a place on the front lines, exactly as he described himself. As the story goes on, though, we see him treat Jojo with respect. We also see him try to convince Jojo not to spend so much time focused on the Jews. It's not obvious at first, but as it goes on, it becomes clear he's subtly pushing Jojo to try and have more respect for people who are different. And we rarely, if ever, see Captain K outside the company of his right-hand man, Winkle, played by Alfie Allen. More and more, as we see Captain K and Winkle together, their relationship appears less that of a soldier and his trusted subordinate, and more that of close friends, or perhaps even more. It's only ever seen in quick and subtle glances, things that would go under the radar for people who weren't looking for them, and especially would go over the head of Jojo, who just has no clue what this stuff is all about right now, and that's where our perspective is coming from. But eventually, Captain K does arrive at Jojo's home while the Gestapo are searching for Jews, and he helps Jojo and Elsa escape notice by lying for them. We begin to understand that his constant drinking may not be because of the injuries or his inability to find glory, but rather because of the regret for the horrible things he's seen and done to protect his own life. Toward the end of the film, in case there is any doubt left in the audience's mind as to his sexuality and feelings about Nazism, he and Winkle wear flamboyant accessories on their uniforms as they fight the invading Americans and Russians. These accessories are complete with the pink triangles that gay men were forced to wear in Nazi Germany as they were ushered into concentration camps, similar to the Star of David forced upon the Jews. Finally, later, Captain K lies again, accusing Jojo of being a Jew after some Americans attempt to take Jojo as a prisoner of war. The implication, as Jojo is dragged away by an American soldier, is that Captain K is executed for his role as a Nazi soldier. I guess the question that's going to be on a lot of people's minds is whether or not Captain K is a good person. The events of the movie initially seem pretty clear. He protected a Jew and a young boy at great personal risk and eventually at the penalty of his own life. But he's also the man who won multiple awards for valor in battle and presumably killed or helped kill many people before being sent to Jojo's town. And it's clear that Captain K, at least, does not see himself as a good person. In his last moments with Jojo, he offers condolences for the death of Jojo's mother Rosie, saying she was a good person. An actual good person. Jojo believes Klinzendorf to be a good person at this point, and that's why the clarification. Klinzendorf was presented with an impossible choice long before we ever meet him. He could risk being outed as a gay man and then be ostracized and perhaps killed by his fellow countrymen, or adopt the camouflage of becoming an honored soldier for the cause so that he would be above investigation. He chose the latter. Many of us, I think, would jump to call that an act of a selfish person concerned only with their own well-being. It wouldn't necessarily be wrong. But how many of us might make that same choice, given similar circumstances? Is it so easy to insist to ourselves when our own lives are on the line that some other people from some country we've never met and can't know and might not die, we might not end up killing them? Could their lives be worth ours? Could it be easy to justify that if we didn't join the military and kill those other people, that someone else would, so we might as well do it to protect our own skins? Be clear, I'm not saying that Klinzendorf made the right decision, or that he made the wrong decision. I'm saying the circumstances of hatred and bigotry he was placed in forced him to make an impossible decision that no human should ever have to make. The victims of these things aren't just the people who are killed or harmed or even have insults thrown at them. They're also the people who are forced to hide to protect themselves, and who are forced to feel as if doing bad things is the only way to stay alive. Klinzendorf is responsible for the people he killed while he was protecting himself, and he ultimately dies because of it. But it's easy to see how the society around him bears some responsibility too for forcing him to make that choice. One more thing I think is worth noting about Captain Klinzendorf. He was ultimately killed by the people who, if you had asked them, would have told you that they were fighting to save him. The US fighters wanted to liberate the people oppressed by the Germans, right? That would have included the homosexuals such as Captain K, but because of their limited understanding of the circumstances both in general in Germany and specifically around the captain, they end up killing the very person they came to save. This is a warning to us all to beware when we fight for others, that we're still listening to them to make sure that we're fighting the right people. Speaking of which, I've read elsewhere that some people think the Captain K character is an insult to gay people because his sexuality is played for laughs. Now, I am willing to be wrong on this because I myself am not homosexual, and I absolutely do want to hear from my homosexual audience members if I'm wrong. Please enlighten me. However, I think that's a misreading of the character and the writing. I don't think the character was, or his relationships, were ever played for laughs. As a matter of fact, I distinctly remember moments of dissonance where the formula of the movie had me expecting a moment to be played for laughs when it was not. The only time where any of this is remotely funny is when Captain K and Winkle show up to the final battle at the end of the movie in their accessorized uniforms. But those accessories come complete with obvious pink triangles. And it's clear that this moment is to reclaim who they are, to be open and proud about it as they face their end. It's not a moment of movie silliness at their expense. I respected Captain K a lot because he wasn't perfect, but he did good in the places he felt he could. And I also can certainly understand wanting a movie that focuses on people like Captain K and Winkle more thoroughly tells their kind of story. But I thought that for what this movie was, their story was included well and told adeptly. So those are my thoughts on Jojo Rabbit. It's not a perfect film. I believe it fails the Bechdel test, among other possible issues, but it's still very good and more than deserving of the many awards and nominations it received. If you haven't watched it, I hope this video convinced you to give it a try. If you have watched it, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you have a beautiful day, and may all of your paths be paved with hexagonal stones. And this is the part where I do a quick shout out to all of my beautiful patrons. Go to my Patreon, linked in the description below, and sign up for as little as $1 a month to join them in helping me make more videos like this.